Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. And it's Daniel here, and we're going to try and continue our interview series. And I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast presenter of the Horse Racing Heroes, and you might recognize him for some Paddy Power videos as well. And it's Mark Walsh to the podcast, not the jockey, of course.
Thanks very much for having me down. Yeah, very much not the jockey. Zero talent.
And that's obviously your Twitter bio, but I guess that's more out of necessity than anything else, based on maybe some tweets you might have gotten for some of your rides.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough. I haven't received too much abuse if he's gotten beaten on a horse, but Mark, he very rarely gives a horse a bad ride, so that helps. But yeah, basically everywhere I go, I'm the other Mark Walsh. I remember even my first day in university, I went in to meet my tutor, like all enthusiastic, and I walked into the room and I said, "Hi, I'm Mark Walsh," and he goes, "Oh, the other Mark Walsh." And even you mentioned Paddy Power there. I'm the second Paddy Power. I'm the second Mark Walsh in Paddy Power. So yeah, it's a tough name at times, but now we're getting there.
Yeah, I suppose, Mark, for listeners, they might, if they're watching on YouTube here, they might kind of recognize the face a small bit from certain Paddy Power videos. You've been working there a while.
Yeah, working there. I was straight out of university, actually. Lucky enough to get on the grad program, Paddy Power. So I've been there 8 years or something now. Wow. Kind of in the marketing team, yeah. And look, I love it. Myself and a few colleagues of mine kind of run the social media channels there, so get to make some really fun video content. Back in the old days before COVID, we used to get to attend sporting events and kind of cover them on Instagram and Snapchat stories. So yeah, a job we absolutely love. We've had some great days, some great trips, and long may it continue.
Yeah, because my memory when I if someone says Mark Walsh to me and the Paddy Power videos, is yourself and Tom on the back of a bus somewhere in, I don't know, Texas or somewhere on the way to a Super Bowl, drinking cans of Prazsky and trying to, keep it quiet on the back of the bus. It seemed like it was great crack anyway.
Yeah, like honestly, unbelievable days. There was a period where Ireland qualified for the Euros before me and Tom got to go to a few of those games. The qualifiers, I remember the one where James McLean scored against Wales in Cardiff. Like, that was an unbelievable trip. And then we got to go to the Euros when Wes Hoolahan scored against Sweden. I remember that. So like, there's been some great ones. And like you mentioned, the Super Bowl, yeah. Lucky enough to get to a Super Bowl, which was just an incredible experience. And not WrestleMania, but the Royal Rumble there in January 2019. And then the final work trip was Cheltenham 2019, or 2020 rather, sorry, 2020. Yeah, we were at Cheltenham then, so I came back and had to keep the head down for a bit after that work trip when everyone who was at Cheltenham was regarded as a bit of a leper. But yeah, so awesome, honestly, incredible work trips. Very, very lucky and appreciative to have it. I know a lot of sports fans listen to your podcast will be kind of jealous of getting to go to sporting events for work. But the one thing I'll say is I appreciate it, and I've always been very grateful for it. So yeah, no, love it, absolutely love it.
Yeah, because it seems like you're just doing normal things as long as you're videoing a certain amount of things and keeping them updated. Like, there's no like 2 hours where you're just forgetting to video or anything like that.
No, we're not clocking in as such, and we'll try and produce videos around like things we'd like to do. So a silly example, but I remember years ago we went to Vegas. It was actually for the McGregor Mayweather fight. And we were just looking at things to do, and there was like a restaurant in Vegas where if you don't finish, there's some massive burger, and if you don't finish it, they like spank you with like a wooden bat. And we were like, okay, that's good crack, and there'll be good video content as well. So things like that. But yeah, there's no clocking in and out on the work trips, but they're great crack, and we hope that they're worthwhile, that we get some good stuff when we're at them as well.
Yeah, no, funny enough, I do actually remember that one. Paddy Power was with you on that one, I think.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, tell us a little bit before, because you're, as I mentioned, top of the show there, you're presenter of the Horse Racing Heroes, but maybe a little bit about horse racing itself. Like, when did you become involved in the sport? Were your family into the sport and all, or what kind of attracted you to watching horse racing to start with?
Yeah, I was a bit of a late bloomer to the game, really. No family interest in it at all. Grew up not really much interest or knowledge about it. When I was in university, I worked part-time in a small independent bookies called Pat Toolan's. And that kind of taught me, I would say, more about betting than racing. I still didn't quite get into racing, but I remember being there watching. I remember seeing Frankel win the Queen Anne. And in particular, I remember Cotto Star winning his 5th King George. I was in the bookies that day. And I remember, this will kind of show how little racing knowledge I had at this point. I remember Cotto Star went and won. I remember all the lads in the bookies cheering him on and like nearly hugging each other, And I had a look at the field book, which is where you'd see what bets you'd taken. And I remember saying to my boss, like, Donald, basically nobody's actually backed Cotto Star, but they're all going mad for him. And he was just like, yeah, he's different. And obviously looking back now, I understand, looking at his record and everything, I understand now why that was such a big deal and why that was so great. But then I think it all kind of kicked off my interest in racing when I was in Paddy Power then. My first Cheltenham in there was when Champagne Fever won the Supreme Novices, and just, I think a lot of lads had backed it. I think William Hill were doing fucking loads of each way places, and loads of lads had backed it. And it was just a great atmosphere in the office. And then it just kind of grew and grew every year then. I think the following year was Faugheen's novice hurdle, and Faugheen's been a horse that really kind of I've followed, and he really helped get me into it. But yeah, just I think going into work, listening to racing podcasts and stuff, gradually just increasing the knowledge. Yourself, Daniel, like you're always learning with racing, even when you think about 2 years ago I would have thought I knew plenty, and looking back now I hadn't a clue, and I'm sure I'll think the same in 2 years' time. But it's just been gradual since then, kind of getting into it just from watching it, listening to podcasts about it, reading books or reading the Racing Post, and now doing a podcast.
Yeah, well, that there you go. Like, it's amazing some of the horses that you named there, and I think they're so important for people to get into racing. That when you're obviously the Cotto Star thing, but even talking about Champagne Fever and Faugheen, I know I can relate to that as well. Being over at Cheltenham and seeing these amazing horses, and the atmosphere over there is just a little bit different, isn't it?
That's incredible. It's unbelievable, and like it's one where betting almost doesn't matter as much at Cheltenham. Obviously, a lot of people are betting, but like it's one where there's always appreciation of a good horse and a good winner, and a winner, even if it's 33 to 1 shot, will get roared and cheered into the winner's enclosure there. And it's just it's some of those things you hear people say, oh, you just have to experience it, or it's a different class. And you might even if you're a bit skeptical, but then when you get there, it's incredible. The roar for the Supreme as well when the tapes go up is just it's class. It's great to be there, and I hope I'm lucky enough to get back next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope we're all lucky enough to get back here,
Yeah.
back there next year. So, what gave you maybe the idea in terms of horse racing heroes? Because it sounds like it just came from when you're talking already about those horses. Those horses like can transcend the sport into a wider audience. And I know a lot of sports journalists wouldn't cover horse racing just because they wouldn't really get the betting or wouldn't really be into the betting. But there's definitely a lot more to horse racing than betting, which I guess is what's the beauty of the horse racing heroes.
Yeah, I guess like whenever you speak to someone involved with horses, or you hear someone or read someone talking about horses, you quickly learn there's every single horse has a couple of little stories about them that you wouldn't necessarily hear in the form book. And I used to always just love hearing those, whether it's something silly, like I think, there's a story of Hurricane Fly biting Willie Mullins in the arse, like after he won an Irish champion hurdle, and little things like that. And I used to love them. And then obviously COVID came along, there was the lockdown. I mentioned I used to listen to a lot of racing podcasts, and most of those, if not all of them, are kind of previewing the weekend or talking about the latest events. So when there was no racing on, there weren't many podcasts to listen to, and I was unfortunately walking more than ever with no podcast to listen to while walking. So whatever way, it just came to me, the idea for a podcast that didn't rely on current events or racing going on, and something that could kind of stand the test of time as well. Even when I was trying to dig back through old podcasts for something to listen to, they're all old news or had expired. So that, and the knowledge that there's always these great stories about horses, the idea came along for a podcast where every episode is just about one great horse. I thought I would only cover horses that had retired, so there was no, subsequent stories to come, in theory. And yeah, no betting, no news, just kind of great horses. And I would just try and interview people and hear some of those little stories that I think every racehorse has with them.
Yeah, so for season 1, you had 10 horses that you covered. Like I don't know, I didn't really know where to start with some of the stories, but I know Champagne Fever, which you touched on, would be front and center for a lot of people, and not just for winning that novice hurdle the year you went, but also the heartbreaking Arkle loss. And when you had the podcast and I had to listen back to Patrick Mullins and Ruby Walsh, I think I got a small bit of closure towards the end of that podcast. I don't know if any other listeners, if they needed or have listened to that, felt the same.
Yeah, that article was very painful for me. I think I backed him anti-post. And yeah, I think like I wanted to, obviously I want to cover big names, but I don't want to just do the obvious. I don't want to just do Cotto Star, Hurricane Fly, Frankel, all those kind of things. And Champagne Fever, I thought, was a nice balance of, he's a big name. A lot of people, most people would know him and have heard of him, but he's not quite that superstar status. And there was a good story with him. He won twice at Cheltenham, got beaten one in the Arkle, as we know. And then missed the following year then because he got bitten by a stablemate. So I just knew there was a good story there. And luckily, Patrick Mullins and Rude Boss were kind enough to talk about it. And yeah, I'm glad you got closure out of it anyway, after all these years.
So yeah, so what would have been your favorite out of the season one so far? Because I know like some horses that, like for example Shake the Bucket, would have got an incredible reaction, because I know myself, I would have probably back Shake the Bucket a couple of times when you've been running on a Friday night in Dundalk or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people could just relate to that. And when he's not, like, obviously, like you said, he's not like a big name. It was amazing hearing his story, and the owners got such pleasure out of overhearing, the crowd saying, "Oh, we're back Shake the Bucket. Sure, he always runs his race."
Yeah, no, I loved Shake the Bucket, and that was the second episode I released, but it was actually the first interview I ever did. And I was, absolutely shitting myself. And luckily enough, Slippers Madden was just a dream to interview. You just let him take it away, and he was amazing. But yeah, I love Shake the Bucket. One on the flat, one over hurdles, one over fences. Used to run weekly or fortnightly at Dundalk. Great record. So yeah, it was great to do an episode. I thought he deserved that little bit of coverage. He was such a stalwart in Irish racing. And then kind of, I suppose, towards the opposite end of the scale in terms of fame and success, I did an episode about See the Stars. I remember I emailed John Ox's office about it one like Saturday night, and I think the following Monday he announced his retirement. So I was like, okay, this is never going to happen. He's obviously going to get swamped with interview requests and everything. Like, I probably couldn't have timed it worse. And 6 weeks later, I got an email from John apologizing for the delay and saying, "Oh, he'd be more than happy to speak to me." So that was just great. And I would like to speak to someone like John Ox about a horse like that, and that's had great feedback. That was a real pleasure. And then most of these interviews were obviously done over Zoom, with it being, COVID and everything. When restrictions eased a bit, I remember I did my first in-person interview, which was with Brendan Duke about Open Eyed. And listen, Brendan is like just an unbelievable character. Like, you can't help that. One of the comments in that episode was someone said they'd listen to him read the phone book, and I'd be inclined to agree. He's just a great person to chat to. He's got an incredible turn of phrase. He'll just put a smile on your face straight away. So there were some highlights for me, but I almost feel bad, not naming everyone, because I'm such a fan of racing. I'm so grateful to speak to anyone I do, and when they're telling me these stories, I'm absolutely loving it. I almost have to like jerk myself to make myself, okay, remember to ask a question again. Don't just start being a fanboy here.
It's actually funny you say that. When we were going through, I was like, I can't let this bit of the interview go without mentioning Chris, the interview, because like yourself, I'd have gone to racing pretty late, not too dissimilar. And, I obviously heard of Red Rum, but had I heard the story, or had I watched back the races of Crisp and finishing second in Red Rum's first Grand National, it's just a great story. And it was told so well that I went back and watched all those races again, which I guess is what the essence of what the podcast is trying to do. And again, it's so important for horse racing to tell these stories and give people another avenue to get into the sport.
Yeah, like that's great to hear that you did that with Crisp. One thing I always wanted with the show was that every episode would appeal to a listener, whether they knew everything about the horse in question or whether they knew nothing about them. So I wanted it to be something that, even if you were a massive fan of the horse in question, you might learn something new, something you hadn't heard before. And if you hadn't heard of the horse before, you'd finish it thinking, okay, I know their story and I feel a little bit of affinity. I like that horse now. Chris was kind of a fortuitous one, actually. Like, I knew he'd been, like you, I knew he was second to Red Rum in the Grand National. And the reason that episode happened was simply because I saw Richard Pittman is quite an active user on Twitter. So at this point, I was really just trying to get anyone I could, So I DM'd Richard. He's an unbelievably nice man. He replied saying he'd be happy to speak to me, and then kicked on with the research and saw, he wasn't just second to Crisp. He'd won a champion chase. He'd beaten all sorts of great horses over 2 miles, and then he was just done in the Grand National. So and the fact that he was over from Australia as well. I mean, you never hear jumpers coming over from Australia even today, let alone, in the 70s. So yeah, just an incredible story. And it was just a bit of luck, really, that I happened to see him on Twitter, and he was nice enough to reply to my DM.
There's obviously been a fantastic reaction to it, Mark, and your season 2 is scheduled to be released soon. You're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, really excited. Yeah, working on it for the last few months now. As we record, it'll be released. The first episode will be out on Wednesday, 23rd. Great thing about the season, it's HRI, Horse Racing Ireland, have come on board as sponsor, which is like, I'm over the moon about it. Great endorsement for the show to have them on board, and they've been brilliant to work with so far. And I really mean that. And yeah, the first episode next Wednesday, really excited about it. It's about Faugheen. Basically, as soon as he was retired, I set about working on that episode, and so it's a bit of a bumper one. I've got Andy Slattery, who trained him to win his point-to-point, Patrick Mullins, Ruby Walsh, and Paul Townend. And look, I love the horse. I loved making that episode, and I hope it's a fitting tribute to him, and I hope it's a good way to kick off the season, hopefully.
Yeah, because Faugheen's one of those household names that everyone knows, obviously since his 2015 champion hurdle, and I don't think we're going to get a moment like in Ireland for a while to cheer on a horse like that than we did in Leopardstown. And obviously had none of my money on him, but Jesus, the roar and the reception we got. And my personal claim to fame is I'm in the background of one of the Faugheen pictures.
Oh, nice.
So I circle that and tell everyone who'll listen to me. So I guess I'm telling you that now, but it was just an absolute incredible reception in Leopardstown. I don't remember being on an Irish race course anyway, cheering on a horse, and Jesus, I thought he was going to win in Cheltenham that the following March. People forget, like, he only lost by, I know, I'm sure Paul Townend probably would not love to have the ride back, but just went on the wrong side at the wrong time. But it's just incredible longevity in the racehorse who's had so much bad luck through injuries as well.
Yeah, Paul does touch on that moment, so you'll get to hear his side of that story. And yeah, it's only when I was making that episode, going through his career, the amount of setbacks and ups and downs he had, like, pulled up a couple of times the day he fell against Apple's Jade, and just constantly just kept coming back. And at the age of 12, winning that Grade 1 in Leopardstown, like you, that was, I've never experienced anything like that in a race course. That was unbelievable. And yeah, you'll get to hear Paul and Ruby and Patrick and Andy Slattery talking all about him now next Wednesday.
He's one of the first horses that I remember when he got injured. Like, this is so unfair in this sport that the injuries can hurt these horses and stop them achieving. Like, Douvan comes to mind as well. It's almost like so frustrating. So it's great that he managed to get back, because someone like Douvan, I know he got a couple of wins since, but he never quite got back to it. I guess it's what makes the great sport, horse race, but also it's the frustrating part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Douvan's a real, like, he does spring to mind for that sort of thing, especially the way they spoke about him. They used to say I think they'd still tell you, I think Patrick actually even mentioned in the podcast, Douvan probably had more ability than Faugheen, but just his injuries didn't let him show it that much. And particularly that champion chase when he was 2-9 Fav, clearly the best horse by a mile, and got injured in the run. It's extremely frustrating, and especially the Mullins team and the Ritchie team still haven't managed to get that champion chase with Shaq Hun this year. They deserve it. They've had some bad luck. Champagne Fever bitten by a stablemate on the day of the race when he was close to favourite. It's remarkably bad luck they've had in that race. But yeah, it is a frustration when these horses get injured. But when they can come back and show that the fire still burns, like Faugheen did on many occasions, I think it makes it all the sweeter, and kind of makes them makes them a little bit more endearing. You can develop more of an affinity with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So who else is in line for season 2, or what's the kind of format for when our podcasts release for those that have listened to season 1?
Yeah, season 1 was 1 per week for 10 weeks. This season is going to be fortnightly. So a little bit more breathing space between episodes. I'll give you a couple of the first ones. So number 1, Faugheen. Number 2, Hardy Eustace, who actually now lives with Faugheen out in the Irish National Stud. That's with his owner, Lar Byrne, and also Kevin O'Ryan from the telly, who actually rode him on his first bumper. So he was an amazing horse. Like, looking back at the way he wins is unbelievable. He looks beaten so often and just keeps digging and wins. So that's a great one. Episode 3 is going to be about Monju, which I'm sure, like, you've heard how great he was, an Irish Derby winner, and he's also the sire of, like, so many good flat horses, and also he's the sire of Walk in the Park, who is Douvan and Min's sire. But I'll confess that when I started researching him, if you'd asked me 6 months ago who trained Monju, I wouldn't have known. I probably would have thought it was Aidan O'Brien, because I know he was Coolmore owned, but it was John Hammond, who was an Englishman training in France. Had a bit of a helping hand to get an interview with him, and it's just fascinating, like, really, really interesting. So that's one I'm really looking forward to, because I hope there's people like you and me who Monju might have been a little bit before their time, and if they're willing to give a chance to actually learn about this horse, it's well worth listening to. I couldn't do this series without going back to Brendan Duke. So he is back for an episode about a horse called Mr. Benedictine, who he actually won on the flat over hurdles and over fences as well. So look, Brendan's always just incredible value. I love speaking to him, and hopefully I can go back and get a hat trick with him someday. And then probably the highest profile one in the episode, I still kind of can't believe it happened. I got like an hour-long interview with Michael Owen about Brown Panther. So I was just chancing my arm and it managed to happen. But he was honestly amazing. Like, he loved that horse, and he bred the horse. He owned the dam. He's just incredible. And I really can't wait for people to listen to that. I think he comes across extremely well in it. And yeah, it's emotional at times. You know, the horse sadly died like in a race at the Curragh. And yeah, it is an emotional enough listen, but he was fantastic. Like I said, I still can't believe that happened. So there's a few others in there. There's a few kind of, like I said, I try and get variety and people you don't necessarily always hear from. So I've actually got an episode with Francois Duman about the fellow who was long before my time, but he was beaten in, I think, 3 or 4 Gold Cups before he went and won the Gold Cup. And yeah, a couple of other names in there I'm really happy with. So I'm pleased with the variety of it. I've still got a couple more to finish off and stuff, but I'm pleased with the variety, and I hope it'll live up to the first season. And please God, people like it. Please God, HRI like it.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah, the Michael Owen one is interesting to me, geez, because I know how passionate he is about horse racing, and that'll be a great listen. I'd say.
Yeah, no, and he knew that horse's form and everything inside out. Like, it's long enough ago he was running, and I remember mentioning horses he beat on his debut, and he was, he knew absolutely everything, and he properly loved that horse. There's good stories about, I think the horse was running in the St. Leger, and Michael Owen was playing for Man United at the time, and Alex Ferguson went up to him and said, "Look, you can have the day. I was going to have you on the bench, but look, you can have the day off." Yeah, it's great. It's great. So I hope I'm not building up too much now, but like he was really, really nice to speak to, really interesting to listen to. So hopefully the listeners feel the same way.
Yeah, just when you were talking there, I was thinking about the concepts in general, and like there's when you say you're getting into football, so much history, so the Premier League champions, all this, and you can see all footage and stuff like that. And just for whatever reason, I don't find that as accessible in horse racing, I guess. And that's maybe just because of the sport. So you name these old horses that you might not have heard from, and being able to tell their stories, you kind of end up doing that, looking up yourself, and it's just a great concept that allows like people like me and yourself that have love horse racing but might not know as much as maybe we probably should about the history of the sport in terms of the 70s, 80s, 90s, to kind of like look back at some of these great races, and just some of the like horses coming all the way up from Australia to do the Grand National, and then running a Grand National, and then Champion Chase, all these different distances, the flat, the jumps. It's amazing what some of these horses did.
Oh yeah, like there's so many great stories out there, and I love doing it. I actually love like doing the research, like just digging into, like, even when you're starting from a horse you don't know all that much about, literally just Googling them, getting their Wikipedia to get a really quick overview, and then go and dig and starting looking through replays. Like that horse, the fellow, looking at the replays, he looks like he's going to win the Gold Cup a couple of times, and the jockey doesn't go too hard on him. But as you'll hear in the episode, the owner didn't want the horse whipped. So like, imagine how frustrating that was for the trainer to think, well, if the owner didn't have this particular preference, the horse probably would have won a couple of Gold Cups. But eventually he got there in the end. But yeah, I love doing that research, going back through, trying to find old replays, trying to dig around and find little articles, or sometimes even like going down to the depths of, like, scrolling through YouTube comments just in case someone has some little story or something. And yeah, no, I love doing it. And sure, look, it's a labor of love, doing the thing. So yeah, really enjoy it. And there's so many great stories out there.
Yeah, there's always gold in those YouTube comments, in fairness. There's always some little bit of nugget you can take.
Yeah, because there's gold, but there's plenty of absolute turd as well.
You gotta dig through that. Just tell us a little bit. Actually, I know you released a pilot episode of Behind the Bar podcast, which is a new concept. With the board's head. Tell us a little bit about that episode, because I listened back to that. I was telling you, I said I'd listen to it, and I listened to loads of podcasts like Second Captains, usually helps me get to sleep. Like, it's not a slight on the podcast. So I said, I'll try this out and that'll get me to sleep. Geez, I was wide awake listening to some of the stories.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah. Similar thing, kind of had the idea and just thought, sure, look, I'll give it a lash and put it out there and see what people think. My housemate actually like manages a bar, and I just know from talking to him how many like stories he has of the pub. And it's similar to racehorses. I just know like every pub has a load of history and stories behind it. So said I'd make a pilot with the Boar's Head. Got a nice response. I've actually just finished editing an interview with Grogan's Castle Lounge on South William Street. I think that's really interesting to listen as well. So I'll hopefully get that up soon as well. People seem to like it. I'd like to keep making more, but it's at the moment still second fiddle to the racing one. But we'll see. I'll try and keep it going.
Yeah, but just when you name pubs, people probably like, if they hear Grogan's, go, geez, I hope I'm not in one of those stories or something like that. There's almost a fear hits you straight away before you relax yourself a bit there.
Yeah, well, hopefully avoid any getting sued or anything like that. But no, there's some good stories in there, and yeah, please God, people like the Grogan's one, we can make a couple of more.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to kind of do maybe like a little quick fire, Mark, which in terms of like some quick fire questions in terms of horse racing, if you will, for that. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what would be?
We can chop it out if I embarrass myself, can't we?
we can indeed. Yeah. If you're hearing this, I didn't bother in the end.
Yeah.
What would be your favorite standout Cheltenham memory? If I was to say to you, Cheltenham, what's the first thing you remember?
It's probably Faugheen's champion hurdle. Maybe Annie Power's one, but like, I wasn't there for Faugheen's champion hurdle because I was such a fan of the horse, and I can remember being in the office watching it. I think I did have him back to Antipost, but there's a moment when they're turning for home, and I just remember thinking, because he hadn't really been tested against proper 2-milers. I remember like the likes of Prazsky, the new one, kind of looming up beside him, and I remember specifically thinking, oh, he's not as good as we thought. And then he just kind of kicked on again and blew them away. And it's probably that for me. I'll probably finish this interview and regret my answer. I think of a million better answers, but for me, I love that horse so much. So yeah, I'd probably say Faugheen's champion hurdle.
Yeah, I'd jet ski backed in that champion hurdle. Can you believe that?
Yeah. Did you back in the year before?
I didn't know, so I think it was a bit of stubbornness. So back the other was Fisher's Cross. But anyway, we can get into all these news and bets very quickly. Who would be your, and this is probably a tough answer because of what you're doing at the moment, but who is your favorite horse? I know Faugheen's always been a big one for you.
Yeah, like it'd have to be Faugheen, for reasons I've already mentioned. I'd say he took me. He towed me along into being a massive fan of racing. I was into it and interested, knew a bit about it beforehand, but I think he really kind of, seeing the way he won his novice hurdle and his champion hurdle, really kind of brought me there. Loved Annie Power as well, but yeah, it's Faugheen. That's the answer.
You're there trying to make the case for everyone else. Favorite jockey?
Ruby, definitely Ruby.
Correct answer.
Yeah, I think he's the greatest, and lucky enough in Paddy Power, I've been lucky enough to work with him for a number of years now, like making video content around big festivals, and at this point kind of feel like I get on okay with him. We were actually filming, there's a thing that we just put out on Paddy Power. It's a Royal Ascot Rewind with Ruby, Paddy Power and Johnny Murtagh kind of talking through some of Johnny's Royal Ascot rides. And I remember we had a little break in filming, and I had said to Ruby, look, if we get a few minutes today, I might try and ask you a few questions about Faugheen for my podcast. And Ruby was like, yeah, no problem. So there was a point where we were switching the camera shots, and Ruby looked at me and said, do you want to go and have a chat about Faugheen then? I said, yeah, brilliant. Went 10-minute interview. Ruby, as you know, always gold. Like everything he says, there's always insight in it. I think he's a bit of a genius, really. And then that was great. Thanks very much, Ruby. And I went to stop the recording. I hadn't started the recording. All the interviews I've done for this thing and in my life, and I've never done that before, and I did it with Ruby Walsh, and I couldn't believe it. I was mortified, and obviously my instinctive reaction was like, just say nothing. Nobody ever needs to find out that you've done this, Mark. Ruby probably won't listen to the show, so he'll never find out that he's been omitted. And then I just kind of thought, no, come on, just front up. And I said, oh, Ruby, I'm after doing something very stupid. And he goes, what'd you do, forget to hit record? And I went, that's exactly what I did. And he just goes, happens to everyone once, and just sits down again. So I know I've gone on a bit of a tangent there from your question of favorite jockey, but yeah, Ruby Walsh, and just not as grumpy as people make out.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah. Because out of all people to do that to Ruby Walsh, like, because I know, like, he's, and to be honest, he's like the best pundit out there, and it's amazing how even now I'm still learning stuff about racing just when he talks. But geez, I would probably nearly go the side, just say nothing, pretend this never happened.
Yeah, I was really on the verge of doing that, but thankfully fronted up, and he couldn't have been nicer about it.
Yeah, he seems amazing to work with. Like, I know, again, on camera he's brilliant, and he did like the road to Cheltenham with Lydia Hislop is amazing, and the stuff he's doing with Paddy Power is amazing. But he's also brilliant to work with.
Unbelievable. Yeah, like he has that reputation of being grumpy. I would say he isn't grumpy. He's kind of ruthlessly efficient, I would say. So he doesn't like being told, oh, you have to be here at 12, and when filming doesn't actually start till 2 or whatever, and if we're standing around doing nothing. So I think when I did that Faugheen chat with him in between, when he wouldn't have been doing anything else, I think that's the way to do it, but he is absolutely amazing. He, like, if you're showing him a script or an idea, gets it straight away, and will often add to it. And remembering lines, we were filming a thing a while ago, it was just a short, like, it was a piece about the Stayers hurdle, which Paddy Power sponsor, just ahead of Cheltenham. I was getting him just to deliver, like, it was a bit of a paragraph directly to camera, and I remember he took one look at it, did it once with kind of, I was actually holding up the script in front, like beside the camera for him to read, and then he just said, I've got that now. And he just went and did it without needing the lines or anything. He just took it in. And I remember after he left, the crew, the cameraman and the sound guy hadn't, like, worked with him before, so we're just using an alternative studio because of COVID things. And I remember them just going, he just remembered like a whole paragraph after reading it once. Like, they just couldn't believe it, yeah, he's sound like such a fanboy here, but just very intelligent, very good to work with, always gets stuff. Yeah, couldn't speak any more highly about him, really.
Brilliant. What's the best sporting occasion you've ever been at, either through work or yourself?
Like, the biggest event I've been at is the Super Bowl, but I'll be the first to say I'm not a huge NFL fan.
Did it live up to the hype?
It was like it's an amazing kind of bucket list thing to have, and amazing to be there. But I would say I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I would Faugheen winning the Flowgas, or that James McLean goal against Wales, or it's probably the Wes Hoolahan goal against Sweden. That was just an unbelievable moment that I've been at. Yeah, so we'll put racing aside because I think Faugheen and the Flowgas is the one. But Wes Hoolahan scoring against Sweden, I had a lovely view. Like, I was, when he comes up to the crowd to celebrate, we were basically making eye contact, Daniel. He basically looked at me and said, "That was for you, Mark." So yeah, I think that as a moment, being at the Euros, seeing that goal, incredible. Yeah.
Thinking back to the Euros, like, I didn't make it over myself, but just think of all the messing and the videos that happen, and particularly during the COVID pandemic. Hopefully, we're nearly out of it. It's amazing how, I'd say, though, there's some incredible Euros stories that you had. Were you over for the whole thing of it, or?
Unfortunately not. No, I just got to the one game. But I think we were there for a week. It was just the one Ireland game, but I managed to get to England-Wales as well, where they scored, Daniel Sturridge scored like a last-minute goal. So that was great to be at as well. And I remember Paddy Power was doing, like, he was over for the full tournament. He was doing like a daily radio show with Alan Brazil on TalkSport. So it was a very surreal moment. Me and Tom had to go and collect something off Paddy. So we went to Alan Brazil's apartment, where he was having a glass of champagne at like 10 in the morning because he'd finished his show. Very surreal moment. But yeah, to be at the Euros, even just for those two games, just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's your favorite football team?
Bit of a weird one. Yeah, a bit of a weird one. I'm sure you'll remember Football Italia. When I was growing up, I didn't have Sky Sports, but I did have Channel 4 where Football Italia was on. So I grew up supporting Juventus. I wouldn't call myself a massive fan. I don't get upset when they get beat, but I just have a bit of a soft spot for them. And, Del Piero is my hero growing up as a kid. So yeah, Juventus. When it comes to the Premier League, I'm pretty neutral.
He's very good, very good. And not often that happens. Always someone sides with a team, so you never, if you see Arsenal playing United, you just be neutral enough with them.
Yeah, as a kid, I liked Man United, but I would be genuinely neutral now. when Man City a couple of seasons ago were amazing to watch, so I just liked to see them do well, and I'd like to see them win the Champions League. But obviously, well, there's other complications there with the money and everything. But yeah, properly neutral, really. If a team has players who seem to be sound, I'll tend to want them to win.
So, what's your favorite sporting stadium? And you can maybe leave horse racing aside if you want.
See, I haven't been to a huge amount of like amazing ones. I was at the Bernabeu when this wasn't a work thing. Actually, I just went over there for a couple of days. Madrid played against Galatasaray. Gareth Bale scored an unbelievable free kick. Ronaldo was actually injured and missed the game, I think, which was very frustrating to go to Madrid. And how often does Ronaldo miss a game? But yeah, so that I've been to, probably the Bernabeu was incredible. I remember I did in school, I did a tour of the Nou Camp or the Camp Nou, and that was amazing as well. But I haven't experienced it for a match yet. So as it stands, probably the Bernabeu.
What's the kind of this is one I was thinking just when I picture you guys drinking cans of Prazsky in the back of the bus. What is the standard drink to go to? Are you lads off camera? I like to say, are you lads drinking? Are you a Prazsky can drinker, man, or are you more of a what will be your go-to on a night out or whatever?
So I'm not being funny here. It's very similar to Prazsky. There's a Polish lager called Karpacki, and I'm not. This isn't a joke. I absolutely love the stuff. And I please, if you're listening to this, go out. You can get 4 cans for $5. Go out and just try it. Ice cold, goes down smooth. It's when lockdown's over, when we can travel again, I'm on the way to Poland to see if I can get Karpacki on draft. Genuinely love the stuff. It's just a shame I can't get it on draft here.
Yeah, it's yeah, I know myself and a few lads were Prazsky, Karpacki. It's the goats and the off license, to be fair. So I can kind of relate, albeit I don't know if I'd give it the shout out you would.
I just listen, give it a chance. Give it a chance.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Marcus, for those listening to Horse Racing Heroes, I know there was a small hint about Eamon Dunphy impression before. You're a bit of an Eamon Dunphy fan, anyway.
I love Dunphy. Absolutely love him. My old Twitter header was that Dunphy Giles, and I think it might be Ray Houghton at the time, or maybe it's Brady, wearing like fake mustaches and stuff. There's some unbelievable bits. I love him. Absolutely love him. Paddy Power actually did a video with him recently, which I didn't get to attend the shootout, which I was disappointed about. But I think he's incredible value. Just an incredible turn of phrase. When you could any day of the week go and watch some of his best moments on YouTube, and they're still funny. And yeah, just I think we're very lucky. Certainly were back in those days when it was Dunphy, Giles, and Brady, like that they weren't afraid to be honest and slag people off. You see some of the coverage now. A lot of it's pretty poor. I'm not necessarily saying RTE there, just generally speaking. Like those lads were just incredible value. Absolutely love Dunphy.
When you were talking, I was thinking of the Euro 2020. You're not going out of your way to watch the analysis anymore. And I think RTE have gone too much down the road of analysis, where we want a bit of sound bites now and again, particularly in an international tournament. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, I haven't actually watched a huge amount of analysis. I'll watch the games and then flick off.
yeah, get tweeting on the Paddy Power account.
Yeah.
Those that want to kind of keep up to date with Horse Racing Heroes, what's the best way to follow you on social media? What's the is it available on all podcast apps, and what do people go and look for?
Yeah, all the major podcast apps. Horse Racing Heroes is the name of it. Definitely on Apple, Spotify, and I think all the big ones. There's probably one or two I haven't yet got it onto, but and yeah, on Twitter I'm just at Mark Walsh. That's the best place to get updates from me. You know, this is I beat the jockey Mark Walsh to the Twitter handle, so I've won really, haven't I?
Poor Mark when he wants to get Twitter.
Yeah, there you go.
And is there anything before we go, Mark, that you want to talk about just in terms of the podcast or in general, or have we kind of covered everything?
Geez, I think we've covered everything, Daniel. Yeah, I really think we have. Like, listen, thanks to you for doing this. When I started, like I mentioned this on the final episode of season 1, when I started that podcast, I really had I had a very real fear that it might just fall on its arse. Like nobody would listen. You know yourself, there's so many podcasts out there, it's hard to get traction. So just really grateful to everyone who did listen. You were very kind to me when it first came out. Gave me a couple of retweets and shares, and those things go a long way. And yeah, just hopefully season 2 can live up to it. And any support from any listeners, anyone who's thinking about giving it a chance, please do. I'll appreciate it. And thanks to you for having me. Like I I think yourself and your brother Sean are a really fucking good duo. I don't know how you manage to keep up to date with so many sports and have such a good knowledge in all those sports. Yeah, it's a great listen. It's a great dynamic the two you have. So I'm certainly a listener. And I said to you the other day, that episode you did with the Celtic fan, the
Luke.
pure Luke, yeah, the pure rage and anger in his voice was like, I was laughing out loud walking down the street listening to that. It was incredible. So please get him on after every defeat Celtic have next season.
Yeah. Well, they got the new manager in the end, Agnes,
Yeah.
as Luke calls him. So that should be interesting. Ange.
And yeah. I'll be
Listen, Mark,
listening.
listen, appreciate the kind words, and thanks, Mill. And what we've done is we've linked all your socials and Horse Racing Heroes details of how to follow the podcast. And I would recommend giving yourself a follow on Twitter. You're good, particularly around the racing times and a few memes. So thanks, Mill, for coming on.
Well, Daniel, thanks, Mill, for having me. I really appreciate it. So thanks very much.
Cheers.